Hey guys, what's up? My name is Zach, and today I'm going to be doing an election prediction between Biden and Trump. So I see a lot of these videos on YouTube of election predictions, and I found them very interesting. I enjoy just using the electoral maps myself just to see how certain elections would play out. So yeah, we're just going to run down the line. I'm just going to switch it from to save the toss-up for now. So I think that this currently is the most likely scenario for 2020. Biden's a front runner in the Democratic Party. He definitely has very good approval overall due to his ties to the Obama administration. He plays well in the Rust Belt, which the Democrats need in order to win elections in general. So yeah, let me just run through the states and why they're safe, I guess, since this is my first election prediction video. So this area, safe Republican. I don't see it flipping anytime soon. Nebraska, except for that second electoral district, which is Omaha and the suburbs, will not be solidly red or solidly anything. We'll talk about that eventually. Kansas, Oklahoma, the South, except for Georgia and North Carolina. We'll talk about those two states soon. Kentucky, West Virginia. And Indiana normally wouldn't be solid red, but due to the Mike Pence factor, and Mike Pence being the former governor of Indiana, it would go solidly red, as we saw with the 2016 elections. In Missouri, I mean, some people say that wouldn't be solidly red, that'd be by maybe less than 10% for either candidate, but I disagree. I think that'd be solidly red. I mean, we saw that with the 2016 election, and I don't see why that would change. That would change by such a drastic margin, because Hillary Clinton lost it by like over 20 points, I believe. So I don't see why that state would change so drastically in just 2 years. But let me just go over. Let me just switch colors. I'm just going to go over what these colors mean in the first place. This shade, which is the lightest shade. That means it went to either candidate by a margin of 5% or less. That's the closest. That's the closest color. This darker shade that's like lighter than this. That means it went by a margin between 5 and 10%. And if it's solid, that means it's above 10%, or it's a solid state for either color. So let me just fill in states that I consider toss-ups. States that I'd consider to be very, very close. Arizona, I think it'd be that state. We see it trending more and more towards the Democrats with each year. Last election, it was by Trump won it by the smallest margins that we've seen in a very long time. So yeah, I think that'd be a toss-up. Georgia would be a toss-up, I think, for the first time. Well, I think that not last year, 2016, I think it was a toss-up as well, but I think it'd be even closer. This time we see a direct trend of it becoming more and more Democratic, which with each year is a result of stronger African American and minority turnout and progressive turnout as well. I think is a factor here. North Carolina, that'd be a toss-up. It was very close between Hillary Clinton and Trump in 2016. I think it'd be close again. Florida, as always, toss-up. Ohio, as always, toss-up. Pennsylvania, I'll come back to. Iowa, toss-up. Nebraska 2nd District, I would consider to be a toss-up for this election. Oh, I forgot to fill in the Northeast. That's solid blue as well. At least everything except New Hampshire and most of Maine. So let's just fill that in. Yeah, Northeast is solidly blue for the most part. Vermont and New Hampshire in here. Well, Maine's 1st district I think is solidly blue. The rest of it is we'll talk about eventually. So yeah, these are the states I think would be toss-ups for the 2020 election. That doesn't mean that every other state would be a landslide for either candidate. I think that these states are just the closest to call out of all of them compared to the others. Nevada, let's start with Nevada. Nevada, many people are going to say should be a toss-up, given it went to Hillary Clinton by about 2%. But I think that it's still pretty safely blue. It is trending more Republican, make no mistake. The state is trending more and more Republican, but I don't think it'd be a toss-up. Given Trump's low approval ratings, which I think is a factor throughout the United States at this point. And Biden's white middle class appeal, which I think is definitely a factor in a state like Nevada. I think it wouldn't be a toss-up, but it would definitely go between 5 or less percent to Biden, just like it went for Hillary Clinton. I think that Biden would win it by a larger margin than Hillary Clinton, but I still think it'd be within 5%. Nevada in general is a state that Democrats have to be cautious of. I think we'll see that in the 2018 elections in the Senate and the House. So yeah, I guess we'll see how that plays out. As for New Mexico and Colorado, I think that both these states. Let's talk about New Mexico first. It was close to being. I think Hillary Clinton won this state by about 9 or 8%. I don't see that. I definitely don't see that decreasing for a candidate like Joe Biden. I think it's going to stay there. As for Colorado, though, I think that Hillary Clinton won it by less than 5%. I don't know what the exact number is, but I know it's by less than 5%. But I think that Biden can expand that margin and maybe increase it above 5%. So I'd call it the same shade as New Mexico. Texas, I didn't shade this in yet. I'd call that as within 5 and 10% for Trump. Hillary Clinton lost this state by almost 10%, and I think that Biden will narrow that margin even more, but not less than 5%. I don't see that. See this state becoming that close, or becoming a toss-up even until 2024, maybe 2028. It'll become a state for the Democrats, but for now, I'd still call it for the Republicans within 5 and 10%. Let's go up to the Rust Belt. Minnesota. This state did go for Hillary Clinton by, I believe, about 1%. It was very narrow, but ever since then, Trump's approval has plummeted. That's a characteristic throughout the Rust Belt, and I see Biden expanding on Hillary Clinton's margin very much so, and winning it by within 5 and 10%. Michigan, same deal. It was a very small margin that Trump won it by as well, and his approval rating plummeted here. I think that was a big upset. I don't think anyone expected that, and I don't think that that's going to happen again for Trump, especially given his performance as president. Wisconsin. I think that I wouldn't call Wisconsin as a toss-up. It was a toss-up in 2016, but again, given Trump's low approval rating and Biden's white, blue-collar, working-class appeal, I think that it would go to the Democrats by margin within 5%. It wouldn't be a toss-up. I think it'd be Democratic, but narrowly. Pennsylvania. Many of you are probably wondering why I didn't shade that as a toss-up, considering it's been a toss-up for most of the past elections. Joe Biden was born in Pennsylvania. He has great appeal to the white, blue-collar workers here. I think that he's probably the only candidate that I call it for, but I call Pennsylvania within 5 and 10% for Biden. He's probably the only candidate that can make it win by that margin. For most of the candidates, I would either call it as this shade or as a toss-up, but for Biden, I think it'd be within 5 or 10%. Because keep in mind, in 2008, I believe Obama won it by a similar margin. That was mainly because of Biden being on his ticket. Biden has great appeal to Pennsylvania, and I think that's going to really help him come 2020. So as we can see here, Biden has 259, Trump has 163. Biden's 11 electoral votes away from the presidency based on this prediction. So then Virginia, I don't know why I didn't call Virginia sooner. I don't see that. I know that Hillary Clinton. I know that during the 2016 election, I believe it was a toss-up. If it wasn't a toss-up, it was definitely a very close state for Hillary. I don't know the exact margins, but I know it was about 2%, 3%, maybe even less for Hillary Clinton. But however, as we saw with the governor elections and the local elections here as well, Virginia is trending more Democratic. I don't see a way for the Republicans to win that state, especially with Trump on their ticket. Especially, I don't even think it'd become a toss-up. I don't think they're capable of even that. So Yeah, Virginia I would call for the Democrats within 5 and 10%. Okay. New Hampshire within 5 and 10%. I mean, yes, I know that Hillary Clinton won this by a very, very narrow margin. Like within a fraction of a percent, she won this state by. It was a toss-up as well in the 2016 election. But excuse me. Keep in mind that Trump's comments, the whole drug-infested den comments on New Hampshire, I think it's going to be plastered over every single ad in the state. And I know many people think that doesn't matter, that's not really going to affect him, but it will affect him. I mean, he insulted the state as a whole, and I think that will come back to haunt him in the state come 2020. But yeah, I would call that within 5 and 10%. Maybe exactly 5%. I don't see it being close to 10, but I wouldn't see it being below 5. Now Maine, I would call there 2 electoral votes here within 5 and 10%. Maine, so for 2008, the entire state, I believe, went pretty solidly for Obama, and then I think he lost that a little bit in 2012, but then he still kept it pretty well. It was never, the state was never that much of a risk for Democrats. But then in 2016, I mean, the second district was almost completely solidly red, and then these 2 electoral votes, they were at risk. I mean, it very narrowly went to Hillary. But I think that was just one of the many upsets that happened in 2016, and I think that given Biden's Northeastern appeal, given his blue-collar appeal, this would be within 5 and 10% in the second district. I mean, I should have filled in the second district as a toss-up, because that should be what it is. I think it would go narrowly, very narrowly to Biden. Yeah. Okay, so now we're just left with the toss-ups. These are states that I think could change, will probably change. The calls I make for them will probably change come 2020. I mean, obviously this isn't definitive. The election isn't in another 2 years, but these states especially, they are, they're literal toss-ups in my opinion. I mean, let's go over why they're toss-ups. Arizona's been trending more and more Democratic with each passing year. I mean, we saw that in the 2016 election when Trump won it by the smallest margin we've ever seen in decades for the Republicans. I believe it was a toss-up in 2016 as well, and I think it'd most likely be a toss-up in 2020. Second district, I mean, Hillary Clinton was lost this by a very small margin, and Biden has blue-collar appeal, but then again, so does Trump. So yeah, toss-up. Iowa went for Obama by pretty safe margins in 2008 and 2012, and then Trump won it by almost 10%. It was almost completely solidly Republican, which I think is, again, another pretty big upset in 2016. But again, Biden has pretty good appeal in the state, so it's kind of hard to say which is which, so toss up. Ohio, it's kind of the same case as Iowa. Yeah, Trump won this state pretty solidly. I think almost 10%. Not as large as Iowa, I don't think, but I think it was pretty safe for him. But again, approval ratings dropped in both these states here, and I think that Biden would make Ohio pretty competitive. As for North Carolina and Georgia, North Carolina went for Trump by, I believe, both these states went for Trump by less than 5%. And I think that minority turnout is absolutely a factor. African American turnout will determine whether Democrats win or not in these two states, as they almost always have in these past couple of elections. So both these would be toss-ups. Florida, as always, toss-up, very divided state in terms of political ideology, minorities, elderly, the youth. It's a very divided state overall. But I think that, okay, so let's start with Florida first. I think that no matter who the Democratic candidate is, I think that most of the leading Democratic candidates like Biden, Booker, Sanders, I think that most of the leading Democratic candidates would win Florida. I mean, given the recent shootings, given just the drive for amongst the progressive vote in general, amongst the youth vote in Florida, I think that this state would be Democratic come 2020. North Carolina, So Obama won the state in 2008, then lost it subsequently in 2012 by very small margins. Hillary Clinton lost the state, I believe, by 4 point something percent. But again, Trump's approval rating has dropped. Biden appeals good to the blue collar workers here, and also to the African American voters here as a result of his ties to the Obama administration. I think that currently this state would be called for Biden. Now for Georgia, you'd think it'd be the same call as North Carolina, but I would call that for Trump, and this is because the demographics for Georgia obviously aren't identical to North Carolina. I think that if in order to win Georgia, you have to have much more of a grassroots style campaign in order to get out the progressive, not only the African American turnout, not only the African American vote, but also the progressive and youth vote. And I don't think that's something Biden is capable of. I think that's something Bernie Sanders is capable of. I think that, well, I'll discuss that in a separate prediction. I might do a separate prediction for Bernie Sanders depending on how this video goes. But yeah, Georgia, I'd call for Trump narrowly, obviously. Arizona, we see this trending more and more Democratic with each year, but the question is, will that trend be enough for it to go blue come 2020? I think that it's kind of hard to, I think that's, well, obviously all this is hard to say, but I think that this is especially hard to say. I think that it'd be easier to predict following the 2018 Senate and House of Reps elections. So we can see, I think that'd be a good indicator to see where Arizona would go. However, given how things are and given how things are moving, I would call this state for Biden. He has good blue collar worker appeal, middle class appeal that can definitely clash with that of Trump's, and just Trump's low approval rating in the state in general, I think, would be his downfall. Again, but I think that Biden would narrowly win it. I think it'd be a very narrow victory for no matter who wins. I think it's going to be very narrow. As for Nebraska, their second district, Hillary Clinton lost this by a very small margin. I think that Biden can probably pull off a victory in that second district with that one electoral vote. Then Iowa and Ohio, which I think is the two most difficult states to call. Iowa, it was by a very large margin. This state, although the approval rating has dropped here, along with pretty much every other state in the U.S., I still think that Trump would win it. It'd be by a much smaller margin. Trump in 2016, it was this shade, almost even solidly red. But I think that Biden would narrow it. I think that Biden would do pretty well in the state, but not well enough to win it. I think it'd be narrow. And Ohio. In Ohio, the approval rating has dropped much more than Iowa. I think it's something to consider. I think it's also considerable that Biden appeals very well to voters in this state. Like I said, the blue-collar, middle-class, white voters in this state, along with minority turnout. That's also a consideration. I think that this state would go to Biden. Keep in mind, this is all in 2 years. A lot can change in 2 years. But I think in 2 years, this state would go to Biden. Okay, so this is the map I drew out. Biden wins with 353 electoral votes to Trump's 185. Comment down what you think, and if you want me to do more predictions like this, feel free to give suggestions. So yeah, thanks for watching.